The airport was louder than usual that morning. Rolling suitcases rattled across the polished floor. Boarding announcements echoed overhead. People rushed past each other with the impatience that only airports seem to breed. Everyone moving, no one really seeing. And then there was her. She stood near the edge of the departure hall, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, a baby pressed tightly against her chest. Her clothes were simple, a worn gray sweater, faded jeans, shoes that had clearly seen better days. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes, the kind that didn't come from one sleepless night, but from months of exhaustion layered on top of worry. She tried to walk. She really did. She lowered her head and stepped forward, aiming to slip past the line of uniformed airport staff without drawing attention, without being noticed, without becoming a problem. But that was when the baby stirred. A soft sound escaped from the tiny bundle in her arms, not a cry, not a laugh, but something in between. A fragile, curious noise that cut through the mechanical hum of the terminal like a whisper of truth. The woman froze, because she knew what would come next. "Ma'am?" The voice was sharp, unforgiving. She stopped walking. Slowly she turned around. "Yes," she said quietly. The security supervisor, tall, broad-shouldered, impatience etched deep into his face, looked her up and down. His eyes paused for just a fraction too long on her clothes. On the baby. On the way she clutched her boarding pass like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. "You can't stand here," he said. "This area is restricted." "I'm sorry," she replied immediately. "I was just trying to." "You need to move along," he interrupted. "Or step aside." A few heads turned. People slowed. "Wash." The woman felt the familiar burn rise in her chest, that heavy mix of embarrassment and helplessness. She adjusted the baby in her arms, whispering softly as if to apologize for existing. "I'm not causing trouble," she said. "I just need a moment." The supervisor's jaw tightened. "We don't have time for moments," he snapped. "Either comply or I'll call additional security." The baby shifted again, tiny fingers curling against her sweater. And suddenly the woman stopped apologizing. Not because she wasn't used to this, she was. But because she was tired. Tired of being invisible until she became inconvenient. Tired of being judged before she spoke. Tired of being treated like a problem simply because she didn't look like she belonged. "I have a valid ticket," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm flying today." "That's not the issue," the man replied dismissively. "The issue is you're holding up foot traffic." Behind him, a sharply dressed man in an expensive suit sighed loudly. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Why do people like this always slow things down?" The words landed harder than the supervisor's threat. The woman felt her throat tighten, but she refused to look down. She shifted the baby slightly, and that was when it happened. The baby turned her head. And the moment those eyes opened, everything changed. They weren't ordinary eyes. They were large, bright, and an impossible shade of green, the kind that seemed to glow under the harsh airport lights. The kind that made people look twice without knowing why. The baby stared past the supervisor. Straight at him. A man standing a few steps away. He had stopped walking the moment he heard the raised voice. Now, his suitcase stood forgotten beside him as he stared at the child in the woman's arms. His breath caught somewhere deep in his chest. Because he had seen those eyes before. Not once. Not twice. But every time he looked in the mirror. His name was Daniel Mercer. And in that instant, standing in the middle of a crowded airport, he felt his entire world tilt. The woman noticed his stare and instinctively turned her body slightly, shielding the baby. "Is there a problem?" she asked quietly, now addressing him. Daniel couldn't answer. His eyes were locked on the baby's face, the curve of her nose, the shape of her chin, the way her fingers flexed with curious intelligence. Details he hadn't known he'd memorized until now. "How old is she?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The supervisor scoffed. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." But Daniel didn't look away. The woman hesitated. 8 months, she said. 8 months. Daniel swallowed hard. The timeline hit him like a punch to the ribs. 8 months. He remembered the night she'd left. The argument. The words he could never take back. The job offer he'd chosen over a conversation. The supervisor stepped forward again. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one last time to move." "No." The word came from Daniel. Calm. Controlled. Final. Every head turned. The supervisor frowned. "Excuse me?" Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and removed a sleek black card. He held it up, not dramatically, not arrogantly. Just enough. "I'm saying she's not going anywhere," he said evenly. And neither is that baby. The supervisor took the card automatically. His expression changed instantly. Color drained from his face. I didn't realize. I know, Daniel said quietly. That's the problem. Silence spread through the terminal like spilled ink. The woman stared at Daniel now, confusion etched across her tired face. He looked at her, really looked this time, and the weight of realization crushed down on him. She hadn't come here to make a scene. She hadn't come to cause trouble. She had come to walk past him. To disappear. And the baby in her arms had refused to let that happen. Daniel turned back to the supervisor. Step away, he said. Now. The man nodded quickly and retreated. The murmurs around them grew louder. The woman's hands were shaking. Who are you? She asked softly. Daniel opened his mouth. And then the baby smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a reflex. But a wide, unmistakable grin, the kind that reached her eyes and lit her entire face. The same smile Daniel's grandmother used to wear. The same smile his mother said ran in their family. The same smile he hadn't seen in years. I think, Daniel said, his voice breaking despite himself. That's the question we both need answered. The airport announcements resumed. People began moving again. But for Daniel Mercer, time had stopped. Because in the middle of all that noise, he finally understood something he'd been too blind to see before. Success meant nothing. If you walked past the people who needed you most. And this story, their story, was only just beginning. She didn't ask for help, but the world forced her to explain. The woman didn't speak right away. She stood there in the middle of the terminal, the baby still smiling in her arms, as if the entire airport hadn't just paused around them. Her heart was racing, not with hope, but with fear, because moments like this never lasted. People with power always helped for a reason. And reasons came with consequences. I don't need special treatment, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. I just want to board my flight. Daniel felt the weight behind her words. Not pride, protection. Protection born from too many disappointments. Too many promises made by people who looked important and vanished when responsibility appeared. You're not asking for special treatment, Daniel replied gently. You're asking to be treated fairly. The supervisor hovered nearby, visibly uncomfortable now, glancing between Daniel and the growing crowd. Sir, he said nervously, if there's been a misunderstanding. There has, Daniel interrupted. And it started long before today. He turned back to the woman. Where are you flying? He asked. She hesitated again. Chicago. The word hit him harder than he expected. Chicago. So she was leaving. Leaving the city. Leaving him. The baby shifted, letting out a soft sound, almost a complaint, as if she sensed the tension tightening around the adults. Daniel swallowed. That's a long flight with an infant, he said carefully. She nodded. I've done longer. That sentence carried a story all its own. The crowd nearby had grown thicker. Whispers traveled fast. People loved drama, especially when it didn't involve them. Phones came out. Eyes lingered. A sharply dressed woman leaned toward her companion and murmured, Why do people travel with babies if they can't handle it? The woman heard. She always heard. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that defending herself only invited more judgment. Daniel heard it too. And something inside him hardened. He turned toward the onlookers, his voice calm but cutting. She's handling it just fine, he said. What she doesn't need is commentary from people who've never walked a mile in her shoes. The murmurs stopped. The woman looked at him now with something new in her eyes. Not gratitude, not trust, but disbelief. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. You don't even know me. Daniel met her gaze. I know more than you think, he said. Her grip tightened around the baby. That's not reassuring. Fair enough. He nodded. You're right. I owe you an explanation. But not here. She shook her head immediately. No. I'm not going anywhere private with a stranger. Smart. Strong. Still protecting herself. Daniel respected that. Then let's sit, he said, gesturing toward a nearby seating area. Public. Open. Your rules. She considered it, the baby, the eyes, the way her body leaned instinctively toward him without permission. Against her better judgment, she nodded once. They sat. The terminal noise faded into a dull hum as Daniel finally allowed himself to really look at her. She looked older than he remembered. Not by years, by weight. The kind of weight that motherhood and survival place on a person's soul. You're thinner, he said softly before he could stop himself. Her jaw tightened. And you're richer, she replied. Looks like we both changed. The words weren't cruel. They were factual. He deserved that. I didn't know, he said. About the baby. About any of it. She laughed quietly without humor. No, she said. You didn't ask. The truth landed between them like a dropped glass. I tried to tell you, she continued, her voice trembling now despite her effort to stay composed. That night. I was scared but I was ready. And you, she swallowed. You talked about timelines and opportunities and how a baby would ruin everything you'd worked for. Daniel closed his eyes. I never said ruin, he whispered. You didn't have to, she replied. I heard it anyway. The baby reached up then, tiny fingers brushing Daniel's sleeve. He froze. The contact sent a shock through him, electric, undeniable. The baby stared up at him with those green eyes again, studying him like a puzzle she was determined to solve. She does that, the woman said quietly. She watches people. Figures them out. Daniel's throat tightened. She gets that from my family, he said before thinking. The woman stiffened. What? He looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear bloom behind her eyes. You noticed, he said softly. Didn't you? She didn't answer. She has my eyes, he continued. My grandmother had them. They don't just happen. Silence stretched. The baby gurgled. Finally the woman spoke. You don't get to decide that, she said. You don't get to claim her because of genetics. I'm not claiming, Daniel replied. I'm asking. She stood abruptly, rocking the baby protectively. This was a mistake, she said. I should have kept walking. Daniel stood too. I wish you had, he said honestly. Then I wouldn't know what I've been missing. That stopped her. She turned back slowly. You walked away, she said, tears finally breaking free. You chose your career. I chose survival. I know, he said. And I was wrong. Those words were rare from Daniel Mercer. People noticed. A man nearby whispered, Is that him? Another replied, Yeah, that's him. Recognition spread. The woman saw it. The way people straightened, the way respect appeared instantly once his status became clear. She felt sick. So now they listen, she said bitterly. Because you're important. Daniel didn't deny it. That's why I'm standing here, he said. To use what I have, not for myself, but for her. He looked at the baby. At both of you. Tears slid down the woman's face. You don't get to rewrite the past, she whispered. No, Daniel agreed. But I can take responsibility for the future. A boarding announcement echoed overhead. Chicago flight. Her flight. She looked toward the gate. Then back at him. I don't know if I can trust you, she said. You shouldn't, Daniel replied. Not yet. He reached into his jacket slowly, carefully, and placed something on the bench between them. Not money. Not a card. A folded document. What's that? She asked warily. A legal acknowledgement of paternity, he said. And signed. Untouched. Yours to decide. Her breath caught. You came prepared, she said. I came hopeful, he replied. The baby let out a soft laugh. And for the first time since the terminal confrontation began, the woman smiled. Just a little. Not because justice had been served. But because for the first time, someone powerful wasn't trying to take. They were trying to stay. They judged her in public. Then the truth exposed everything. The boarding call echoed again. Final boarding. Chicago. The woman adjusted the baby on her hip, her body already turning toward the gate, instinct telling her to leave before hope could make things harder. Daniel didn't stop her. Not yet. Because he knew something she didn't. The terminal supervisor returned, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 additional security officers followed behind him, their expressions serious, professional, and unmistakably suspicious. The woman's heart sank. Here it was. The moment where kindness revealed its price. Ma'am, the supervisor said loudly, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. We've received a report. A report. Those words always came with judgment already attached. A report of what? She asked, her voice tight. Unverified travel documentation, he said. And a concern regarding the child. The baby whimpered softly. The woman's arms wrapped tighter. What concern? She demanded. She's my daughter. The supervisor glanced at Daniel, then back at her. That remains to be confirmed. A hush fell over the gate area. Phones came out again. Whispers spread faster this time, sharper, crueler. Is she trying to kidnap the baby? People will do anything these days. She doesn't look stable. Each comment struck like a blade. The woman felt herself shrinking under the weight of 100 stares. "This is ridiculous," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I have her birth certificate. I have her ticket. I've flown before." "Then you won't mind a brief verification," the supervisor replied coldly. The baby began to cry now, not loudly but in that distressed, confused way that only infants do when they sense danger they don't understand. The woman rocked her gently, tears streaming freely now. "Please," she whispered. "You're scaring her." Daniel stepped forward. "This stops now." The supervisor stiffened. "Sir, with respect, this is protocol." "No," Daniel said evenly. "This is prejudice disguised as protocol." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The supervisor's face flushed. "You're out of line," he snapped. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He reached into his jacket again, slowly, deliberately, and held up his identification. Not just a card. A badge. An official authorization. The effect was immediate. One of the security officers straightened. The supervisor swallowed hard. "Daniel Mercer," the officer said, recognition dawning. "Sir." The murmurs exploded. "That's him. The Mercer Group CEO. He owns half the development projects downtown." The woman stared at Daniel in disbelief. "CEO?" The supervisor's tone shifted instantly. "I didn't realize you were personally involved," he said hurriedly. "We were just responding to a complaint." "A complaint from whom?" Daniel asked. The supervisor hesitated, then gestured. The sharply dressed woman from earlier stood frozen, her face pale. "She reported suspicious behavior," the supervisor said. "Concerned for the child's welfare." The woman holding the baby stared at her. "You reported me?" she asked, voice shaking. The other woman crossed her arms defensively. "You didn't look prepared," she said. "Someone had to think of the baby." Daniel turned slowly. "Prepared?" he repeated. He gestured to the diaper bag at the woman's feet, worn but organized. Bottles labeled. Medical documents neatly stacked. A feeding schedule taped inside. "She's more prepared than most people in this terminal," Daniel said coldly. The reporting woman opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel turned back to security. "She has valid documents," he said. "You've seen them. This interrogation ends." "Yes, sir," the officer replied immediately. The supervisor's shoulders slumped. "I apologize for the inconvenience," he muttered toward the woman. She didn't answer. She was too busy soothing her crying child, the only thing that mattered to her in that moment. The crowd watched as power shifted, visibly, undeniably. Respect hadn't been earned through appearance. It had been enforced by truth. The reporting woman backed away, humiliated. Instant karma had arrived. Daniel knelt in front of the mother and baby. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stepped in sooner." She looked at him through tears. "This is what happens," she said softly, "when you look like me." Daniel felt the weight of that sentence settle deep in his chest. "You won't face this alone again," he said. She shook her head. "You don't know that." "I do," he replied. "Because I won't allow it." The baby calmed, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. Those green eyes looked at Daniel again, searching, knowing. The gate agent cleared her throat. "Ma'am," she said gently now, "you and your daughter are cleared to board. If you'd like assistance." "No," the woman said firmly. "We're fine." She stood, dignity reclaiming her posture. Daniel walked beside her toward the jet bridge. People parted. Some looked ashamed. Some looked inspired. Some looked angry that the story hadn't ended the way they expected. At the entrance to the plane she stopped. "This doesn't change everything," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied. "But it changes something." She looked at the baby. Then back at him. "You still have time to walk away," she said. "You're good at that." Daniel smiled sadly. "I'm done running." The baby reached for him again, small fingers curling around his tie. The woman hesitated. Then for the first time she didn't pull the baby away. He had everything, until he chose to give it up. The jet bridge smelled faintly of recycled air and coffee. The woman paused just before the plane door, her body angled forward, ready to step into a future that no longer felt as certain as it had an hour ago. Daniel stopped behind her. "Before you go," he said quietly, "there's something you should know." She turned slowly. Her guard was still up, but thinner now, fractured by what she had just witnessed, by how quickly power had turned cruelty into silence. "I'm listening," she said. "I canceled my afternoon board meeting," Daniel continued, "and tomorrow's investor briefing. Her eyes narrowed. So I don't do that, he replied. Ever. That got her attention. For 10 years, he went on, I built my life around proving I was indispensable. I missed holidays, birthdays, funerals. I told myself it was all for the future. He swallowed. And then I watched security question you like you were disposable. Her jaw tightened. And I realized, he said, this future I built doesn't mean anything if I'm not there when it matters. She looked down at the baby. She needed you 8 months ago, she said softly. Daniel nodded. I know. The baby shifted, letting out a sleepy sigh, her head resting against her mother's collarbone. You don't get to fix that with money, the woman continued. Or apologies. I'm not trying to, Daniel said. I'm trying to show up. Every day. If you'll let me. She closed her eyes. This was the moment she'd imagined, and feared, 100 times. The moment where the man who once chose ambition now stood asking for a place in a life she'd rebuilt alone. You don't know how hard it was, she said, her voice breaking. Waking up sick every morning. Working 2 jobs while pregnant. Pretending I was okay when I wasn't. Daniel's throat tightened. I know you suffered, he said. But I didn't know how. She opened her eyes. I didn't want you to, she whispered. Because if you knew, you might have stayed. And you didn't think you deserved that? He asked. She laughed softly, bitterly. I thought love was something you had to earn by not being a burden. Those words shattered something inside him. You were never a burden, Daniel said fiercely. You were my anchor. I just didn't realize I was drifting. A flight attendant cleared her throat gently, reminding them they were blocking the doorway. The woman nodded. I have to go, she said. Daniel reached into his pocket one last time. This time he pulled out his phone. I'm flying to Chicago tonight, he said. Her eyes widened. You're what? I'll take the red-eye, he said. Sit in the back if I have to. I just want to be close. Not in control. Not in charge. She studied him, searching for arrogance, expectation, entitlement. She found none. And your company? She asked. I appointed an interim CEO this morning, he said calmly. She stared. You gave up control? I chose responsibility, he replied. The baby stirred again, eyes fluttering open. She reached toward Daniel. Not accidentally. Not reflexively. Deliberately. The woman hesitated, then gently allowed Daniel to take her. The baby fit against his chest perfectly, like she'd always belonged there. Daniel closed his eyes, emotion flooding through him. I missed this, he whispered. You never had it, the woman replied. He nodded. Then I'll earn it. They stood there for a moment, 3 lives balanced on a fragile decision. Finally she spoke. You can come, she said. But slowly, carefully. On her terms. Daniel smiled through tears. Always. As she boarded the plane, Daniel handed the baby back, reluctantly but respectfully. At the gate, the crowd that once judged now watched in silence. They didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They learned. Because power had knelt. Because status had stepped aside. Because respect had finally been earned. She tried to walk past him, and changed everything. Chicago greeted them with cold air and quiet resolve. The city didn't care who Daniel Mercer was. It didn't pause for reputations or titles. It demanded presence and consistency. And that was exactly what he intended to give. The first weeks were not cinematic. They were humbling. Daniel stayed in a modest apartment near hers, not the luxury hotels his assistant suggested. He learned the rhythms of early mornings and late nights. Learned how to warm bottles without overheating them. Learned that success meant nothing at 3 a.m. when a baby cried and only patience could fix it. He never pushed. Never assumed. Never demanded. And that was what changed everything. The woman, whose name was Clara, watched him closely. Every day. Every moment. Waiting for the inevitable excuse. The board call that couldn't wait. The meeting that mattered more. It never came. Instead, Daniel showed up. To pediatric appointments. To grocery runs. To quiet evenings rocking a baby who refused to sleep unless she heard his heartbeat. People noticed. Not because he was famous, but because he was present. At a cafe one afternoon, a woman recognized him and whispered excitedly to her friend. Daniel simply smiled politely and went back to spoon-feeding mashed bananas, his tie abandoned, his phone untouched. Clara watched from across the table. That night she finally spoke the truth she'd been holding back. I was afraid, she admitted softly. Not of being alone. I'd already survived that. I was afraid of believing you. Daniel nodded. I was afraid of becoming irrelevant, he replied. Turns out I'd already made myself irrelevant where it mattered most. The baby babbled between them, blissfully unaware of the emotional bridge being rebuilt around her. Weeks turned into months. Daniel declined a public speaking award. Then another. When reporters asked why, he answered simply, I'm busy being a father. The headlines changed. Not out of scandal but respect. One afternoon, Clara and Daniel took the baby back to the same airport. Not to run. Not to escape. But to return. The supervisor was there again. So was the woman who had reported Clara. This time, the baby laughed loudly, drawing smiles instead of suspicion. The supervisor approached slowly, eyes lowered. I owe you an apology, he said to Clara. I judged before I understood. Clara nodded once. That's all most of us ever want, she replied. The reporting woman stood frozen, shame written plainly across her face. Daniel didn't confront her. He didn't need to. Justice had already done its work. As they walked toward the gate together, no one blocked their path. No one questioned their worth. No one dared underestimate the quiet strength of a woman who had survived without applause, or the man who had finally learned that real power listens before it speaks. At the gate, Clara stopped. She looked at Daniel, not the CEO, not the savior, but the man who had stayed. You know, she said softly, I didn't need you to rescue us. I know, Daniel replied. I just needed to stop rescuing myself. She smiled. This time fully. The baby reached for both of them. And for the first time, neither hesitated.